My name's Jake. I'm 28, and if you told me a year ago that my life would be flipped upside down by my own family, I probably would have laughed it off. I always thought I had a tough skin. Grew up with a mom who knew how to use words like knives and a younger brother who somehow always got away with everything. But I never imagined I'd reach the point where I'd walk away and not look back. I always thought, no matter what, I'd endure it. Be the responsible one. The provider. The rock, as my dad used to say when things were good. But there's only so many times you can be stepped on before you start wondering if maybe you're the one making it too easy. It started on a Thursday evening. Just a regular day, if I'm honest. I come home from work, late, as usual. I work in finance, managing client portfolios, and with the market the way it's been lately, my hours have gotten longer. I don't mind the grind. I've always worked hard. It's how I paid off Mom's car loan 2 years ago. How I helped cover Daniel's, my younger brother's, college tuition when his scholarships fell through. How I covered the mortgage payments when Dad's hours were cut last fall. Not that I ever made a big deal out of it. I just did what needed to be done. That's what family's supposed to do, right? That night, though, I walked through the door and knew something was off. Mom was in the kitchen, arms folded, glaring at the empty sink like it had personally offended her. Daniel was sitting on the couch with his usual smug look, flipping through channels and not even acknowledging me. I asked what was going on, and Mom just snapped. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice already sharp. "Work," I replied, dropping my keys into the bowl by the door. "Same as always." She turned toward me like I'd said something offensive. "You don't think we could have used some help around here? Dishes are piling up, and the trash hasn't been taken out." I blinked. "Daniel's been here all day. Why is this suddenly my job?" That's when Daniel chimed in without even looking up from the TV. "Because you're the one who thinks he's the man of the house. Act like it." I looked between the two of them, genuinely stunned. I didn't know what was happening. It wasn't about dishes or trash. It was something deeper. A resentment that had been simmering beneath the surface for a long time, apparently. "I've been paying the bills," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm not trying to throw it in anyone's face, but you can't treat me like some unpaid intern around here." That's when Mom exploded. She stepped forward, finger pointed, eyes wide with rage. "You think throwing money around makes you important? You're not doing us favors, Jake. You're just a burden with a wallet. You're not family. You're an obligation." It was so loud, I swear even the neighbors must have flinched. I stood there, stunned, the room spinning slightly. I've heard her say cruel things before, usually during arguments with Dad, but never like this. Never directed at me so plainly, so violently. She wasn't done. "You think we need you? We'd be better off without you dragging everyone down." I didn't say a word. Not right away. I just stood there, feeling my face flush and my heart pound in my chest. There was a dull ringing in my ears, like my body was trying to drown out her words, but they still landed. Each one. And Daniel just smirked, like he was finally watching a scene he'd been waiting for. I turned around and walked up the stairs. My hands were shaking and my throat was tight, but I moved on autopilot. I packed a single suitcase, just the essentials. A few clothes, my laptop, the external hard drive with all my work documents, and a small lockbox with my important papers. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't slam a door. I just walked out. That night, I drove to a cheap motel 2 towns over and stayed there for the weekend. On Sunday, I signed a lease for a 1-bedroom apartment closer to work. It was small, quiet, and mine. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. The next few weeks were eerily quiet. No calls, no texts. I half expected Mom to reach out, maybe even apologize in her roundabout way, but nothing came. Daniel didn't check in either. It was like I'd been scrubbed out of the family photo album and nobody even blinked. And, as much as it stung, a part of me was relieved. There was peace in that silence. An ache, sure, but peace. Then, 2.5 weeks after I left, I got a text from Daniel. "Why isn't the mortgage covered this month?" I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to take a moment and really feel the weight of what I was about to do. For so long, I've been the one quietly holding the family together financially. I covered the $2,100 mortgage every month, set up the auto pay myself, and never asked for recognition. And now? Now they were realizing what it meant for me to be gone. I typed back one sentence. "Guess you're better off without me." And I hit send. The message was delivered. Read. But no reply came. No follow-up. No apology. Just that long, drawn-out silence that suddenly felt a lot heavier on their end than mine. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the screen, waiting. But nothing came. That silence said everything. And that's when I realized they finally felt the absence they thought they wanted. I didn't hear anything from them for the next 2 days. No texts, no calls, just silence. At first, I thought they were trying to play it cool, maybe convince themselves they could handle things on their own. But by the third day, the dam started to crack. It started with a voicemail from Mom. Her tone was unusually polite, strained, like she was trying to wrap her bitterness in bubble wrap. She said something about a little hiccup with the mortgage and asked if I could help out just for this month. As if the last conversation hadn't happened. As if I hadn't been called a burden and told I wasn't family. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a request, almost like a demand wrapped in fake niceties. I didn't respond. That's when Daniel texted again. This time, his tone was much less polite. You're seriously going to ignore Mom? This is your responsibility too. My responsibility? I laughed out loud. I hadn't spoken to either of them in nearly a month. They told me they were better off without me. And now that the financial safety net was gone, suddenly I was back to being needed. I didn't reply to him either. But I knew this was only the beginning. The following week, I got a call at work. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked it up anyway. Jake, came a familiar voice, Dad. Now, to be clear, my dad isn't usually part of the equation. He's quiet, distant. The kind of man who watches the chaos from the sidelines and occasionally throws out a "let's all calm down," like that ever fixed anything. But he was calling now, and that alone was strange. Hey, I said cautiously. He sighed. Listen, I know things have been tense. Tense, I repeated, biting back a laugh. Is that what we're calling it? He ignored the sarcasm. Your mother's been under a lot of pressure. She didn't mean what she said. There it was. The old family script. Sweep it under the rug. Pretend the emotional landmines didn't explode. Move on like nothing happened, except this time, I wasn't in the mood to read my lines. She meant it, Dad. And so did I when I left. There was a pause on the other end. I imagined him rubbing his temples like he used to whenever he didn't know how to respond. We're behind, he admitted finally. If the bank doesn't get something soon, we could lose the house. There it was. The truth. Why isn't Daniel helping? I asked flatly. Dad sighed again. He says he's still waiting to hear back on a few job applications. He's been helping around the house. Helping around the house. Right. Probably still sitting on the same couch, flipping through channels and ordering food with the last of the joint account money. I wanted to scream. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because this cycle had gone on for so long. I'd spent years quietly holding everything together while they drained me dry. And now, the second I stepped away, it was all falling apart. And somehow, I was still the one expected to fix it. I can't help you, I said. Calm. Final. Dad didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. They're going to blame you, you know. Your mom, Daniel. They'll say this is your fault. I know, I said. Let them. And I hung up. For the next week, things escalated quickly. I heard through a mutual family friend that Mom had tried to borrow money from a cousin, someone I hadn't seen in years. Word was spreading fast. Jake walked out, they were saying. Left them to drown. But no one mentioned the years I covered their bills, or the times I skipped my own vacations to make sure Daniel had books and tuition paid. No one mentioned the nights I came home from work at 10 p.m. and still fixed the leaky sink, or the fact that I was never once told, thank you. No, all they saw was that I was gone, and everything was falling apart. Then came the knock at my door. It was a Saturday morning, early. I just made coffee and was sitting on the balcony of my tiny apartment, enjoying the silence. The knock was soft at first, then louder. I opened the door, and there stood Daniel. He looked rough, tired, dark circles under his eyes, and wearing the same hoodie he used to borrow from me in college. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like he wasn't sure if I was real. What are you doing here? I asked, not moving. Can we talk? He said quietly. I stepped aside, but I didn't offer him a seat. He walked in, looked around the apartment like he was trying to understand what a life without them looked like. Place is nice, he said. I didn't respond. I didn't know things were this bad, he finally muttered. Mom didn't tell me how far behind we were. I raised an eyebrow. She didn't tell you, or you didn't ask? He flinched, just slightly. She said we were fine, that you'd come back eventually, that you always do. I let that sit in the air for a moment, let him feel the weight of it. Well, I said, I'm not coming back this time. He nodded slowly, like he already knew. She's scared. They both are. The bank called twice this week. I don't think we can keep up. Then get a job, I said simply. He looked down at the floor. I've been trying. Try harder, I interrupted. Figure it out. Like I did. He looked up at me. I suddenly sharp. It's not that easy. No, it's not, I agreed. But it wasn't easy for me either. I just didn't have a choice. We stood in silence for a long while. Finally, he turned to leave. Just before he opened the door, he looked back at me. Do you really think we'd be better off without you? I stared at him for a moment. I think, I said slowly, you're finally finding out what that actually means. And with that, he walked out. The visit from Daniel didn't rattle me as much as I expected it would. If anything, it cemented something I'd been trying to ignore. They weren't just angry. They were unprepared. For years, they lived in a bubble that I quietly held up from the shadows. And now that I wasn't there, the cracks were turning into fractures, and no one had a clue how to patch them. A few days after Daniel's visit, I started noticing more missed calls. My phone would light up while I was at work, Mom, Dad, even Aunt Lisa. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to give them the satisfaction of pretending nothing had happened. But curiosity got the better of me one night when I saw a number I didn't recognize. It was a voicemail from the bank. Apparently, Mom had tried to list me as a co-signer again, without my knowledge. The automated message was a verification call, asking me to confirm an application that had already been flagged as suspicious. I nearly dropped my phone. I knew my mother could be manipulative. But forging my signature? Trying to drag me back into their financial mess through underhanded paperwork? That wasn't just toxic. That was desperate. And it was illegal. The next morning, I took an early lunch break and went straight to my bank branch. I spoke to a manager and had a long conversation about identity protection. We locked down all accounts with extra verification, flagged any attempts from certain addresses, and I filed a preliminary report regarding fraudulent application activity. I wasn't going to wait until someone ruined my credit to get serious. And still, they kept calling. Mom left another voicemail that night. Her tone had shifted again, no longer polite, but brittle and frantic. Jake, I know you're upset, but this is serious. We could lose the house. Where do you expect us to go? Daniel's got nowhere. Your father's not well. We need you. You can't just abandon your family. I listened to the message on loop, each time hearing more of the subtext. Not a single apology. Not once did she say she regretted what she'd said to me that night. She didn't acknowledge calling me a burden. She didn't own up to anything. To her, I was the one who had turned my back on them because I stopped being useful. That's what I'd always been to them. Useful. Convenient. A financial shock absorber. I sat in the dark after that, staring at the city lights through my apartment window, wondering how long it would take before they truly understood. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't playing a game. I had just stopped. Stopped giving. Stopped fixing. Stopped enabling. The next breaking point came on a Tuesday evening when I got a call from Aunt Lisa. She never usually got involved. She was the distant type, never took sides, always stayed out of the family drama. But this time, her voice was cold. Jake, she said without greeting, I just got off the phone with your mother. She says the mortgage company's sending notices, that the utilities might get shut off, that they could lose everything. I know, I said calmly. There was a pause. So you're just letting it happen? She asked, like the concept was foreign. I let the silence hang for a beat. Lisa, did she tell you what she said to me before I left? She said there was a fight. She didn't give details. Of course she didn't, I muttered. Then, slowly, she told me I was a burden, that they'd be better off without me. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. She said that. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. And she meant it. So I gave them what they wanted. Jake, I didn't know. No one did, I said, because I never made it a big deal. But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. There was another silence, longer this time. Then she said something I didn't expect. I'll talk to her. To your dad too. But you don't owe them anything. If they want you back in their lives, they're going to have to earn it. It was the first time someone in the family said those words to me, that I didn't owe them. It shouldn't have meant as much as it did, but it did. Later that week, I got a knock on my apartment door again. This time, it wasn't Daniel. It was my father. I barely recognized him at first. He looked older, not just in the way people age with time, but tired. His shoulders slumped like the weight of everything had finally landed. Can I come in? He asked. I hesitated, then nodded. He stepped in, looking around with a kind of detached awe. You did all this by yourself? He asked. I've always done everything by myself, I replied. You just never noticed. He didn't argue, didn't even blink. He just sat down on the edge of the armchair and let out a slow breath. I should have said something, he began. A long time ago. About the way your mom treats you. About how much we leaned on you. I waited. I didn't want another half apology. I wanted truth. I let her push you too far, he continued. I let Daniel get away with too much. And when you left, I think we all thought it was temporary. That you'd come back like always. I crossed my arms. I'm not coming back. I know, he said softly. I just came to say I'm sorry. For not being the kind of father you needed. The words hung there. Raw. Unpolished. For once, there was no guilt tripping, no manipulation. Just regret. Real, quiet regret. I'll figure something out, he said as he stood. I just wanted to tell you that in person. And then he left. But the fallout, the real fallout hadn't hit yet. Because the house, the one I'd been covering for nearly 2 years, was about to go into foreclosure. And Mom? She wasn't about to take that news gracefully. He left without asking for anything else. No money. No help. No second chance. Just that quiet apology, which, honestly, was more than I ever thought I'd get from him. And when the door closed behind him, I stood there for a while, unmoving, letting it all settle. The silence in my apartment felt different after that. Not heavy. Not lonely. Just peaceful. I went back to my routine. Work, groceries, gym, sleep. For the first time in my life, I wasn't juggling someone else's problems. I wasn't stressing about due dates on a mortgage that wasn't even in my name. I wasn't watching my bank account dwindle from someone else's mess. I could breathe. And I was finally starting to heal. Until the envelope arrived. It came on a Friday afternoon, tucked between junk mail and a flyer for discount teeth whitening. A thick, official-looking envelope with the mortgage company's logo in the corner. At first, I thought maybe they'd sent something by mistake, some overdue notice still tied to my name from back when I'd made those payments. But it wasn't a mistake. Inside was a letter and a foreclosure notice. It was addressed to the current occupant of my parents' address, but my name was listed as a former payee. The final warning. Payment hadn't been made in over 90 days. The bank was preparing to seize the property. Court proceedings were scheduled. They were out of time. And just like that, I knew the house, the home I'd grown up in, was done. The emotions hit harder than I expected. Not sadness, exactly. Not relief either. More like a strange mix of mourning and vindication. That house held every version of me. The kid who stayed quiet to avoid yelling. The teenager who tried to make everyone laugh so dinner wouldn't turn into a war zone. The adult who paid bills just to keep the lights on for people who never thanked him. And now it would belong to the bank. It felt like the end of a chapter. Or maybe the whole book. That weekend, I stayed in. Watched some old movies. Made pasta. Kept things simple. I didn't check my phone. I knew they'd be calling. I knew that once the reality really sank in, the panic would start, and sure enough, by Sunday night, my phone had 23 missed calls. 11 from my mother. The voicemail she left me was unlike any other. Gone was the anger. Gone was the fake politeness. Her voice cracked like thin ice as she spoke. Jake. I didn't know what we were doing. I thought you'd always be there. You've always been the strong one. You always made it work. I know I said horrible things. I didn't mean them. I was angry. I was scared. She choked on the words. I was wrong. We were wrong. And now it's all gone. There was a long pause before she spoke again. They're coming next week. They're going to change the locks. We have to be out by Thursday. Daniel hasn't said a word in 2 days. Your father's barely eating. We don't know where to go. If you get this, please, Jake. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for, I don't know, something, anything. She ended the call with a whisper. I'm sorry. I sat there on my couch, holding the phone, staring at the wall like it might offer answers. But the truth was, I didn't know how to feel. I had waited years to hear those words. And now that they'd finally come, they didn't feel like redemption. They felt like closure. Because I had already moved on. On Monday, I got a text from Daniel. They're losing it. She cries nonstop. Dad just stares at the walls. I think they thought you'd ride in and save everything like always. But you didn't. And I guess I get why. That was the last message I got from him. On Thursday, the locks changed. I didn't go. I didn't drive by. I didn't want to see the house stripped bare, the porch light off, the windows shuttered like the ghosts inside were finally gone. I didn't need to. The place had stopped being my home a long time ago. I heard later through Aunt Lisa that my parents were staying in a cramped apartment on the other side of town. A friend of theirs from church had helped them with the first month's rent. Daniel had finally picked up part-time work stocking shelves. My dad had applied for early retirement. And Mom, well, she wasn't doing great. Apparently, she cried a lot. Said she didn't recognize herself anymore. And I get that. I really do. Because when everything you built was propped up by someone you treated like disposable furniture, and then they finally walk away, what else is there to look at but the wreckage? I never replied to her last message. I never sent them money. I never visited the apartment. Instead, I focused on my life. I got promoted a few months later. I started dating someone kind, who listened when I talked and didn't expect me to fix their world for them. I took a solo trip to Italy, ate too much pasta, and sat in quiet cafes writing in a journal I hadn't touched in years. I started therapy. I started living. One afternoon, while walking home from work, I passed by a little bookstore and saw a sign in the window. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing yourself. And I stopped, stood there for a long time, because that was it. That was the whole story. I didn't walk away to be cruel. I didn't let the house fall just to teach them a lesson. I chose myself for the first time in decades. I chose peace over obligation, freedom over guilt, healing over dysfunction. And for anyone reading this who thinks they owe people just because they share DNA, you don't. You owe yourself love. You owe yourself peace. And sometimes, choosing those things means walking away from the people who never valued you to begin with. I chose me, and I don't regret it for a second.